This morning, my brothers and sisters, you reached for that little glowing screen. Maybe you wanted to check the weather. Maybe you wanted to glance at the headlines. Just another ordinary morning. But what if I told you that in that same moment, far across the ocean, something happened that will reshape not only Africa, but the very soul of the digital world? Without Silicon Valley's parades, without the shine of Google's stage lights, Africa flipped a switch, and in that holy instant, 1.4 billion Africans just went offline from Google. For decades, we were told a lie, that the internet was universal, that it was fair, that it belonged to us all. But the truth is this: the road was never free. It was a toll road owned by corporations in California and Seattle. And Africa, our brothers, our sisters, paid the toll, paid with money, paid with time, paid with silence. But today, that chapter ends. Today we witness the birth of Africa's internet sovereignty. And if you believe in freedom, if you believe in truth, then I say to you right now, subscribe. Stay with us, because this story is not only about Africa's tomorrow, it is about ours. For too long, my brothers and my sisters, the world has spoken of the internet as though it were a gift from heaven, falling freely, touching every soul, blessing every home. But I must tell you the truth this day. That gift was never free. That blessing was never shared equally. The road that carried your words, your prayers, your dreams across the wires was not yours. It was theirs. For more than 2 decades, the highways of the digital world were carved and controlled by a handful of giants whose names you know well: Google, Amazon, Microsoft. They stood like gatekeepers at the edge of the digital promised land. If you wanted to search, you paid the toll. If you wanted to speak, they set the rules. If you wanted to learn, your knowledge was filtered, sometimes buried beneath their algorithms. And while America enjoyed the illusion of control, Africa endured the reality of dependence. Imagine it, beloved. A student in Nairobi, hungry for knowledge, reaching for a textbook online, yet his request had to sail across oceans, bounce through Europe, travel to America before circling back to his desk. Imagine a young entrepreneur in Ouagadougou with a dream for her people, paying inflated fees to foreign shareholders for the privilege of storing her own creations. Imagine entire nations vibrant with life, reduced to tenants in Silicon Valley's digital apartments. That was the burden. That was the injustice. High costs, slow connections, silenced voices, and Africa bore it all. But then, something changed. Quietly, boldly, courageously, the African Union rose up and declared, enough. They built what no one thought possible. A new highway, not paved with foreign control, but with African hands, African vision, African destiny. They called it the Continental Internet Exchange. Now hear me clearly. This is not just another internet service provider. This is not a mere competitor to the giants. No, this is a declaration. This is revolution in fiber optic cables and data centers. This is sovereignty not in slogans, but in infrastructure. Across deserts, across savannas, across cities and villages, more than 100,000 kilometers of fiber optic cable have been laid. From Cairo to Cape Town, from Lagos to Nairobi, a nervous system of connection now pulses, built for Africans by Africans. 47 major data centers now stand, pillars of independence, ready to serve a people who no longer wish to rent space on someone else's servers. And let us not forget the exchange points, those sacred junctions where digital traffic meets and moves. They are no longer in London, no longer in Paris, no longer in New York. They are in Accra, in Johannesburg, in Dar es Salaam. They are on African soil, rooted like baobab trees, strong and unshakable. Think of what this means. When a child in Ghana asks about the history of the Ashanti Kingdom, her query does not need to leave the continent. When a farmer in Burkina Faso checks the weather for his crops, he is not paying hidden tolls to foreign shareholders. When a preacher in Lagos streams his message, it is not filtered through distant algorithms that rank his words below others. At last, Africa speaks to Africa without interference, without detour, without delay. This is the birth of Africa's internet sovereignty. A birth long delayed, but no less miraculous. For the first time in modern history, a continent has refused to accept the chains of digital colonialism. For the first time, a people have risen not as users of another man's system, but as architects of their own. And the world may not have noticed at first. There was no Silicon Valley press release. There were no glossy headlines in New York or London. But Africa does not need their spotlight. Africa lit its own flame. And today, that fire burns from Dakar to Addis Ababa, from Kinshasa to Khartoum. But now, dear friends, comes the question, will the people embrace it? Will 1.4 billion souls walk boldly onto this new road, leaving behind the toll gates of the old empire? Or will fear, doubt, and habit keep them bound to the chains they have always known? Stay with me, for the answer to that question will shake not just Africa, but the entire world. My friends, the question hung in the air like thunder. Would the people embrace it? Would the masses step onto this new digital road, or would they cling to the familiar toll gates of the West? The answer came swiftly. It came like a rushing wind, like a flood no wall could hold back. Within just 3 days, 3 sunrises and 3 sunsets, over 200 million Africans had switched to the new network. 200 million. Let that number settle in your spirit. Never before in human history had adoption moved so fast. Not Facebook, not TikTok, not WhatsApp. None of them had witnessed such an exodus, such a migration in so short a time. It was not a trickle. It was not a cautious step. It was a wave, a tidal wave sweeping across a continent. In Nairobi, students who had grown weary of slow downloads suddenly found themselves streaming lectures without interruption. In Lagos, small businesses saw their transaction fees drop overnight, no longer forced to route payments through European banks. In Ouagadougou, journalists searched in their native tongues and saw, for the first time, African sources rise to the top. And as the people embraced their sovereignty, panic erupted elsewhere. In Mountain View, California, inside the gleaming glass towers of Google, executives gathered in emergency meetings. Maps of Africa lit up before them, glowing red with adoption rates climbing by the second. Their faces told the story. Disbelief, then fear, then desperation. For years, when a rival appeared, Google had a strategy. Buy them, copy them, outspend them. But this time was different. The African Digital Protocol was incompatible by design. Their search crawlers could not crawl it. Their ad systems could not monetize it. Their cloud services could not anchor it. For the first time in its mighty history, Google faced a competitor it could neither crush nor consume. Microsoft too trembled. Amazon too felt the quake. For decades, Africa had funneled more than $50 billion a year into Western digital services. But now, that river of wealth was being redirected back into African soil, back into African engineers, back into African dreams. The very business models of Silicon Valley were at risk of collapsing on 1.4 billion souls who had simply chosen another way. And it was not only the corporations that shook. In Washington, whispers turned into debates. Could the United States tolerate a continent this size slipping from its digital grasp? For years, America had wielded the internet as a tool of influence, a channel of soft power, as mighty as Hollywood, as potent as the dollar. But how do you sanction a people whose data never leaves their soil? How do you monitor, how do you control when the cables and servers are no longer yours? Across the Atlantic, Paris and London stirred uneasily. Nations once colonial masters now watched their influence evaporate. For centuries, they had shaped narratives, filtered voices, controlled information. Now those narratives were being rewritten in African languages, by African hands. And the West was left standing on the outside, peering in. But while fear gripped the West, joy rang out across Africa. Leaders declared it not only a technical victory, but a spiritual one. This is sovereignty made real, they said, not in speeches, not in slogans, but in cables, in data centers, in code. Youth movements celebrated, singing that Africa was no longer merely a follower, but a leader, showing the world that independence was not just about land or gold. It was about the very airwaves of the digital age. President Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso, who had long thundered against dependency, lifted his voice again. If we can reclaim our mines, our farms, and now our internet, then the days of dependence are truly over. His words resonated not only in Ouagadougou, but in Johannesburg, in Dakar, in Cairo. Across the continent, people felt it in their bones. A new dawn had come. But with this dawn came tremors far beyond Africa. In South America, leaders began to whisper, if Africa can do it, why not us? In Asia, governments studied the model with fresh eyes, daring to dream of their own sovereignty. What began as an African project was fast becoming a global movement. Yes, my friends, this was the climax. Not just faster Wi-Fi, not just cheaper data, but the unthinkable, an empire shaken, a monopoly challenged, a continent rising. And yet, in that very triumph, a deeper question stirs. For when a people step into freedom, the world does not simply applaud. No, powers rise, forces resist, and the struggle is never finished in a single moment. So I ask you now, with Google panicked, with Washington unsettled, with Europe anxious, what comes next? Will the West accept Africa's sovereignty, or will they seek to undermine it, to reclaim the chains they have lost? My beloved friends, when the storm breaks, it does not pass without leaving its mark. And when Africa flipped that switch, the world felt the tremor, but Africa itself felt the change in its bones. Let us begin with the pocketbook, with the economy of the everyday man and woman. For years, Africa had been leaking wealth, $50 billion each year, into the coffers of Silicon Valley. $50 billion drained not by choice, but by necessity, for Africa had no roads of its own. But now that stream has been dammed, redirected, reborn. The money that once left is now staying home. It builds local data centers. It pays African engineers. It seeds African startups. It circulates through local economies like lifeblood, multiplying jobs in construction, in software, in education. Instead of exporting dependence, Africa is exporting confidence. And the effect is not only measured in numbers, it is measured in human lives. Think of the mother in Burkina Faso who once paid a week's wages just to keep her children online for school. Today, her burden is lighter. Think of the doctor in a rural clinic forced to route sensitive patient data through servers in Europe. Today, he shares securely on African soil. Think of the farmer checking prices in his own language, no longer filtered by a foreign algorithm that favored outsiders over locals. Today, he stands taller, for his dignity has been restored. This, my brothers and sisters, is more than faster Wi-Fi. It is dignity. It is sovereignty. It is freedom translated into everyday bread. But the ripple is not only economic, it is political. For decades, Africa's dependence on Western internet infrastructure was a chain around its neck. A government could be threatened with digital sanctions. An opposition movement could be silenced by throttling foreign-owned platforms. A continent could be monitored, manipulated, and controlled from thousands of miles away. That was the old reality. But now the equation has changed. By keeping traffic on African soil, Africa has claimed what I call digital sovereignty. No outsider can pull the plug. No foreign hand can slow the flow. No power across the sea can dictate the terms. For the first time, Africa holds the keys to its own digital gates. This shift has ignited the spirit of a new generation. Remember this, over 60% of Africa's population is under the age of 25. These are digital natives, young men and women who have grown up with smartphones in their hands but with systems never designed for them. Now, the new African Digital Protocol speaks their languages. It uplifts their cultures. It validates their identities. For the first time, the internet tells them, you matter. Your voice matters. Your knowledge matters. The psychological weight of this cannot be underestimated. For a generation long told to imitate, to consume, to follow, it is now their time to lead, to create, to define. And yet, my friends, sovereignty comes not only with freedom, but with responsibility. With the power to govern their own networks, African governments now face a new test. Will they protect free speech? Will they safeguard human rights? Or will they be tempted to use this independence as another tool of control? Civil society is already raising its voice, demanding transparency, calling for safeguards, insisting that this revolution not simply transfer power from foreign corporations to domestic politicians. The people are watchful, and rightly so. Internationally, the consequences echo loud and clear. Western policymakers who once relied on digital leverage now find their weapons blunted. Sanctions that could cripple a nation by cutting cloud services no longer carry the same force. Monitoring, surveillance, manipulation, all are weakened when the data never leaves African soil. And so the balance shifts. The continent once described as vulnerable now holds a shield of its own making. But I tell you this, shields invite new battles. Power never retreats quietly. History has shown us that when a people declare independence, resistance follows. Whether by diplomacy, by economic pressure, or by subtle sabotage, the forces of monopoly will not let go without a fight. So let me ask you, dear friends, is this the true dawn of freedom? Or is it the beginning of another struggle, one that will test Africa's resolve, its unity, and its courage? For the road ahead is not paved only with fiber and code. It is paved with choices, choices of justice, choices of freedom, choices of whether this sovereignty will serve the people or serve the powerful. From the high towers of Washington to the quiet halls of European ministries, the launch of Africa's internet sovereignty was not received as good news. It was received as a shockwave. For the United States, the internet has long been more than wires and screens. It has been a tool of power, a quiet empire built not with soldiers but with servers. Google, Amazon, Microsoft, these were not merely companies. They were extensions of American influence, as potent as Hollywood, as universal as the dollar. To lose access to 1.4 billion Africans is not just to lose revenue. It is to lose data, the raw material of 21st century dominance. It is to lose leverage, the ability to pressure nations with sanctions, to shape narratives with algorithms, to monitor movements with surveillance. For the first time in its digital reign, Washington faces a world it cannot control with a keystroke. In Europe, the unease runs just as deep. France and Britain, long accustomed to shaping Africa's destiny through economic and cultural ties, now find themselves silenced. Their media, once dominant, is being pushed to the margins by African voices. Their influence, already weakened by history's turning tide, now slips further as Africa writes its own story in its own languages. What colonial powers once did with guns and railways, they later tried to do with cables and satellites. But now, even that chapter is closing. And yet beyond the West, the story takes another tone. In South America, leaders are watching closely. For years, they too have paid dearly for access to digital systems that served foreign shareholders more than their own people. Africa's bold move is no longer seen as an experiment. It is a model. In Brazil, in Argentina, in Chile, the whispers are growing louder. If Africa can stand, why not us? In Asia, the reaction is sharper still. Nations that already build their own regional networks see Africa as proof that large-scale independence is possible. Discussions begin in Delhi, in Jakarta, in Manila. Should we follow Africa's example? Should we reclaim our own digital roads before it is too late? What was once unthinkable is now unfolding before their eyes. Thus, what began as an African rebellion is spreading as a global conversation. Should the world remain bound by one universal internet under Western control? Or should every region, every people, every culture build its own path, its own destiny, its own sovereignty? And this is where the greatest tension lies. For America, for Europe, for the West, Africa's independence is a threat, a crack in the empire. But for South America, for Asia, for the global South, it is a light, a sign that even the mightiest monopolies can be challenged. So the question remains, hanging heavy in the air. Will the world embrace this new diversity of digital sovereignties, or will it resist, clinging to the dream of a single internet ruled by a few? My brothers and sisters, when a new chapter is opened, the ink is still wet. The story is not yet finished. Africa has taken a mighty step, but the road ahead stretches long and uncertain. On one side lies promise, bright, shining, irresistible. With its own infrastructure, Africa can foster innovation like never before. A new generation of coders, creators, and entrepreneurs can rise, building systems that serve African realities instead of foreign shareholders. Data can be kept secure. Knowledge can be preserved in African tongues. Wealth can circulate within African borders. This is the dream, the promise of the birth of Africa's internet sovereignty. On this road, the continent is no longer a consumer of someone else's vision. It becomes an architect of its own. And when Africa builds for Africa, the whole world gains. For creativity knows no border. Innovation knows no color. A free Africa can offer free gifts to humanity, gifts born not from dependence, but from dignity. But on the other side, my friends, lies peril. For sovereignty is a double-edged sword. The same power that frees a people can also be misused. If governments turn this independence into a tool of control, the dream could sour. Freedom of speech could wither. Voices of dissent could be silenced, not by foreign corporations, but by local authorities. The very road built for liberty could become another toll road, another prison, another chain. And, beyond Africa's own choices, there is the question of the world. Will America accept this shift with humility, adapting to a new reality? Or will it resist, deploying economic pressure, diplomatic maneuvers, even covert sabotage to restore its lost dominance? Will Europe reconcile with its fading influence, or will it grasp for control once more? The future may not be decided only in Africa, but in how the great powers respond to Africa's stand. So here we stand, at the crossroads of history. One road leads to a fractured world, where regions turn inward, building walls of fiber and code. divided and suspicious. The other road leads to a world of balance, where many sovereignties coexist, where diversity is strength, where no one monopoly holds the keys to the kingdom. The choice is Africa's, the choice is the world's, and the time to choose is now. For the struggle is not over, it has only begun. The age of digital colonialism is ending, but whether it falls quietly or collapses with a fight, that is the question still before us. My beloved friends, we have walked together through this story of power, of struggle, of freedom. We have seen how, in one single moment, 1.4 billion Africans just went offline from Google. But we must understand, this is not the end. This is the beginning. For Africa has not merely connected to faster Wi-Fi. No, Africa has claimed something deeper. It has claimed dignity. It has claimed sovereignty. It has claimed the right to write its own destiny in the language of code and fiber. This is the birth of Africa's internet sovereignty. And it is a birth that echoes far beyond one continent. Think about it, my friends. When nations can guard their own data, when people can hear their own voices rise without foreign filters, when economies can keep their wealth within their own borders, then sovereignty is no longer a slogan, it is a living reality. And once a people taste that reality, they will never go back. But with freedom comes responsibility. Africa's leaders must now prove that this power will serve the people, not oppress them. They must resist the temptation to replace one master with another. And the world must decide. Will it respect this new dawn, or will it resist, clinging to a monopoly already crumbling? For us, watching from America, from Europe, from across the oceans, this moment calls us too. It calls us to humility, to reflection, to courage. It calls us to recognize that the digital world must be fair, that truth must matter more than monopoly, that dignity must outweigh profit. So I leave you with this question, my brothers and sisters. Do you believe this revolution will spread, reshaping the very architecture of the internet? Or do you fear that resistance will rise, dragging us back into the chains of digital colonialism? If you feel the weight of this moment, if you believe in freedom over monopoly, then I say to you now, subscribe to this channel, share this story, and let your voice be heard, because history is turning. The age of dependence is ending, and though 1.4 billion Africans just went offline from Google, what they gained was far greater. They went online with sovereignty.